Egypt, land of mystery and wonder. No civilization captures the imagination quite like it. Over the course of thousands of years, the ancient Egyptians perfected the art of organization, and this, combined with an influential state religion and a strong centralized government, allowed them to create some of the greatest works of all time. This is their story, a story of farmers and pharaohs, a story of history's first nation-state. Egypt served as the conduit through which early hominids migrated out of Africa. Fossils found in Georgia, dating back 1.8 million years, show that Homo erectus had visited Egypt long before modern humans even existed. It would, however, be another 1.7 million years before intelligent life would really begin to make its mark on Egypt. By 70,000 BC, Homo sapiens had also crossed over into Eurasia, and some of our ancestors stayed put in Egypt, living as hunter-gatherers. Over the next 60,000 years, a gradual increase in tool quality laid the foundation for a leap forward. At around 11,000 BC, the Neolithic era began, an era where early humans transitioned from being nomadic hunter-gatherers to sedentary farmers. By 9,500 BC, the 8 founder crops of agriculture made their appearance in the Levant, and at around the same time, small farming communities were established around the Fertile Crescent. In order to understand the importance of agriculture in Egypt, one must understand the environment of the time first. Both Egypt and the Sahara looked vastly different in 11,000 BC. The Sahara was a lush region filled with animal life, and a hunting ground of plenty for our ancestors who could easily live off the land. This is in stark contrast to the modern Sahara, and the reasons why are extremely interesting. The amount of solar energy the Earth receives varies according to a 23,000-year cycle, and happens as a result of the planet's axial precession and the rotation of its elliptical orbit. When the Earth receives more solar energy, the Sahara receives more rain and is greener. The opposite is also true. If you are interested in the finer details of this process, you will find links to an article and a video that go into more depth in the description. Back to agriculture. Since Egypt and the Sahara were rich in biodiversity during the early Neolithic, the hunter-gatherers living there had little reason to adopt a sedentary lifestyle. With climate change, though, this was no longer the case. The desertification of the Sahara created food shortages that only farming could resolve, and more nomadic communities settled down and took up the plough. Fortunately for the Egyptians, they were sitting on some of the best farmland imaginable. Every year from June to September, heavy rains in the Ethiopian mountains cause the Nile River to flood and overflow its banks. The floodwater brings with it new soil and nutrients, replenishing farmland. When the flood recedes, it reveals some of the most fertile land on earth. So essential was this process that the ancient Egyptians would name their country after it. They gave it the name Kemet. Translated in English, it means the Black Land, in reference to the black, nutrient-rich soil left over after the Nile floods have receded. At around 5400 BC, the groups of people inhabiting the banks of Lake Faiyum show the first consistent evidence of an agriculture-based society in Egypt. They created storage pits for their grain and lived in one place for most of the year. They practiced animal husbandry, the process of breeding and farming animals, and this significantly contributed to their food supply. They also made basic pottery. In our time, archaeologists and historians would label this as the Fayyumian culture. It would last for around 1,000 years. Around 5000 BC, towns with over 1,000 inhabitants were forming throughout the north, fed by agriculture. One of these settlements was at Merimde, on the banks of the western Nile Delta. It was larger than any of the settlements around Lake Faiyum, but other than that it was quite similar. The inhabitants of Merimde practiced agriculture in much the same way, although archaeologists have discovered a greater amount of cattle bones there, suggesting that the people of Merimde really enjoyed their meat. They also hunted hippos. A single hippo could give 5 times as much meat as a cow. Fishing also played a significant role in collecting food for a large settlement. What is perhaps most interesting about the Merimde culture, which is what some historians would end up calling it, is their pottery. Before they came, the pottery that existed in Egypt was mostly for practical use. The potters of the Faiyum had created some decorative pottery, but generally they stuck to making practical wares. The potters of Merimde, on the other hand, began creating pots for the purpose of decoration. They adorned these pots with reliefs of farmers and herringbone patterns, and so on. For the first time with the Merimde culture, we begin to see elements of what we normally associate with ancient Egypt: fancy decorations and patterns adorning everyday objects, beauty for the sake of beauty. So far, we have looked at communities in Lower Egypt, the northern part of the country, but around 4400 BC, Upper Egypt was about to enter the stage. The ancient Egyptians had an inverted perception of the world, literally. They viewed the Nile as flowing down from above and called the southern parts of Egypt Upper Egypt and the northern parts Lower Egypt. We, on the other hand, will keep the map the same as what we are used to. Around the modern town of al-Badari, excavations have uncovered evidence of the very first people to farm in the Nile Valley. Archaeologists named the group of people the Badarian culture. They differed substantially from the previously mentioned cultures. Instead of living at a certain point, they were spread out over the area of Middle Egypt, with a population considerably larger than any group of people living in Egypt before them. They adopted farming and pottery techniques from their northern predecessors and improved on these. With the Fayyumian and Merimde cultures, hunting still played an important role, but for the Badarians it was no longer significant as their economy survived solely off farming, animal husbandry and fishing. The pottery created by the Badarians was also of a higher standard than before. They created thin, highly decorated pots that would remain unequaled in quality throughout the entire history of Egypt. Pottery is so essential to the story of the Badarians that it not only captivated the interest of the archaeologist who discovered them, Guy Brunton, it also allowed another archaeologist, Flinders Petrie, to accurately give dates for when they lived. There is strong evidence that the Badarians lived between 4400 and 4000 BC. Some evidence suggests that the culture may have come into existence around 5000 BC, but this is not well supported. Almost everything we know about the Badarians comes from their graves. They were the first people in Egypt to bury their dead with many ornaments such as pottery, ivory, jewels, and so on. Looking at this fact in particular, we see the first evidence of an upper class developing, as some graves contained more ornaments and were separated from the rest. That is the end of part 1. I hope you have enjoyed it. I want to cover every bit of ancient Egyptian history until Alexander the Great's conquest of the country. The source material for the series will be the 4 books shown, which I feel more than covers everything. Our chronology of ancient Egypt can be very inaccurate, simply due to the fact that very few objects survive from the early and pre-dynastic period. As time progresses though, historians are able to more accurately date an event. In the case of the books here disagreeing with the date, I will use the Oxford History of Ancient Egypt as the correct source. The books are all pretty much in agreement over the events themselves though, it's usually just the dates that can differ by up to 100 years. Join me next time as we explore the Akkadian cultures, which were a direct precursor to the ancient Egypt we all know.